So the title is different from the program, but not the content. I use the term dispossession in terms of grappling, and I will explain later on why I did that. And I also put in front mass and fast, which also I'm going to explain. I don't think it's necessary to repeat the known story of the housing bubble and in United States and the problem with land and rent activities that were the generators since 2008 of the present global crisis. Also, I don't think it's necessary to recall in this type of audience that because of the dominance of finance capital of our time, this crisis, which was very local and very land-based, in particular United States have been transferred and spread all over the global north, although with various intensities and different kind of epicenters. I have argued elsewhere that the depth is not the reason of the crisis, but it is one of its manifestations. And we have to look on the reasons and the more, let's say, basic foundations of the crisis in productive and social forces, and particularly in the changing interconnection between productive activities and rent-seeking activities. And I will develop this point later on. Dina has already explained the effects of the crisis on a particular scale, which is not so well discussed and not so well studied yet. We keep, let's say, a macro perspective. And this is exactly the level that the government and the Troika is using to convince us that there is a success story. Because some macroeconomic indicators are behaving better than several years before. So, again, macroeconomic indicators are used as explanations of the crisis, and also some changes in those macro indicators as illustrating the success, similar to what Bernd was describing this morning in terms of how they play with statistics in Bundesrepublik. And after 4 years, I believe that both society and government, of course for different reasons, are exhausted and very vulnerable. And I think by the end of those 4 years, we have the beginning of the latest phase, I believe, of the crisis in Greece, which is land dispossession. For some time, I'm struggling with an hypothesis, and it is the following. I try really to think and answer a very simple question. I mean, all those very well-trained economists and politicians in high-ranking, let's say, institutions, they see that this kind of program cannot succeed in Greece. After 4 years, we have a much higher public debt, state public debt, than in the beginning of the crisis. Nothing of, let's say, the major positive effects that we're expecting is with us. The opposite is true. with rising unemployment, continuing, let's say, depression, and all those hidden effects that Dina was describing in the morning. So why they continue that bloody thing? And although of course there are again macro explanations, and some have been already said by Mrs. Lagarde in an interview, arguing that so we may did some mistakes with Greece, but that was an essential, let's say, payment for saving the European banks and other major European economies. I mean, what really they did in a macro level is they have gained time. They have gained time and they have changed their own institutions and their own economic and financial and particularly banking structures, so that if an accident, quote unquote, happen, then we'll be better prepared when the first victim, Greece, could say in a moment, okay, we exit the euro, sorry guys, we don't pay. At that moment, that will be disastrous for the euro and disastrous for the eurozone. But now they have prepared themselves, so that's why there are predictions by official, let's say, economic institutes that in 4 years Greece will either exit the euro or they are going to be bankrupt or both. So my hypothesis is that the two most valuable assets at the micro level that Greece can offer to the creditors are, on one side, a very well trained and educated young generation, and second, land and land-related activities. And of course the young generation, the highly educated young generation, is dispossessed by migration. They go abroad. Bernd already said that in terms of brain drain. And not only places, societies of destination can accumulate surplus value with their own labor abroad, but they are saving also the cost of reproduction, of social and educational reproduction of those well-educated people, because they haven't contributed at all. So the first, let's say, hypothesis is related to a dispossession of educated labor force, and this has to do through mobilization. I mean, they have to migrate abroad. The second is land. But land is immobile, so it has to be dispossessed in situ. And that's why any kind of regulation which could make this kind of dispossession easier is most welcome. Experience from Eastern Europe, immediately after the fall of so-called socialism in existence, tell us this bloody story of, let's say, biased land dispossession through privatizations and sellings internationally. So that's a lesson that we know very well. But that's another lesson which our friends and comrades from Germany has teach us, and it was the process of unification between former DDR and Bundesrepublik. And this kind of process has been, let's say, the prototype in Greece, which has been imitated using functions and experience, particularly by Treuhand Corporation. And as I'm going to explain later on, this is a prototype that is imitated now in Greece. And Bernd has already underlined the importance of this kind of unevenness in the process of unification, which reproduces today levels of inequality, both social and spatial, and which is also one, among many other factors, of the dynamism of the German economy as a whole. As I said in the beginning, in the global north, we are living in the era of finance capital. And the political expression, its political expression, neoliberalism. It has been already discussed so far. But I would like to underline a particular aspect of this financialization and neoliberalization. And this is the gradual change from investing in productive activities towards investing in rent-sinking activities. All kinds of rent, not only from land. Because I believe the successful figure of a capitalist today is not the old figure of industrialist or rich merchant and so on, who, independently of whether they work in the same way as his own worker, at least they did some work. They start doing some business. So it was a kind of work. Now the successful figure is the guy who lives and makes profits from unearned income, from all kinds of rents. And that type of rent has to do, let's say, with the stock market, has to do with investing in gold, has to do in buying public companies through privatization, and has to do also with investing in land and land-related activities. That's a diagram which shows the three major areas of interest of finance capital since 91. That's global figures, but there are also some interesting figures about farmland in Romania and Bulgaria. The land which is calculated here is only agricultural land, let's say land for agricultural production. Does not include other land-related activities like extraction, like real estate and so on. It's only farmland. But even from here, you can see how important is to have a box of investment, land-related investment vis-à-vis gold, which is the red, and stock market, which is the green. Okay, and you have also the purple, which is the price index of United States housing market. So, when I say land-related activities, I include everything that has to do with land, from real estate to, let's say, infrastructural projects, from extraction of minerals in, let's say, in land as well as in the oceans, from controlling, let's say, rights that are related to land, for example, biodiversity, buying different kinds of, let's say, okay, I will find the term later on. From biofuel cultivation, all kinds of these land-related activities. And just an indication for the UK economy, this is a chart that my friend Michael Edwards sent me. You can see from the period of 1982 to 2010, the development of tangible assets in terms of residential property is this blue. related to commercial and industrial, and this is this one. Agriculture, it's this small for the UK. This one is plant and machinery. This is civil engineers' work. This is vehicles, and this is stock and work in progress. So you can see residential property, how important it is for UK economy. And several, let's say, charts like that are applicable to most countries in the global north. However, in the global south, we have really the geography of land grab. The picture is changing totally, and here we have mass investments for countries in the north in terms of taking and acquiring massive areas and millions and thousands of acres for land production, for agriculture production, food production, for export. You have, let's say, Saudi Arabia grabbing thousands of acres in Ethiopia. You have the Chinese, again, in Ethiopia, Sudan, and Nigeria. You have the Indians to grab land in the Congo, and the Americans in Latin America, and so on. So any major investor in our time, it has in his own portfolio a combination of all kinds of rent-sinking activities, including land. Of course, to facilitate this kind of fever towards land, there were major restructuring in the banking, in the world banking sector, particularly in investment banks. They need, let's say, to create new type of products and new type of securities. And institutions like the IMF and the World Bank have also organized a kind of regulatory framework so that those risky investments can find their own way in very different social and economic and political environments. And nation states now, because we don't live anymore in the era of colonialism, independent nation states are very important players in this type of, let's say, land invention, because they need to negotiate with the investors. And the particular political, social and regulatory environment in which those negotiations are taking place, it's very important. And I believe here comes the case of Greece. Land is not like any other of commodity. I mean, we know very well this. So we cannot produce land and sell land. We cannot export land. Land is a very peculiar commodity because it has not been produced by any means of production. It is free in nature. So in order to be commodified, it needs a process which has an initial violence in it. And Marx has already that explained in volume 1, the process of enclosures in 16th, 17th and 18th century, and how these common lands have been translated and became a commodity later on. And that, of course, has initiated the whole process, as we know, of proletarization and accumulation at the beginning. And this has also a particular history in any social formation. We cannot generalize process of capitalist expansion, of course, but particularly the relations between land and its particular social formation is so important because it shows us the differences through the process of land commodification. And in Greece, and it is very well known for the Greek audience, but I'm saying that for our German friends, we end up after a very lengthy process of land redistribution, land acquisition, the different phases of formation of the Greek state, etc., after the liberation in 1821, we end up in a very polarized land tenure structure. We have on one hand a very large amount of small landholders, both in rural areas and in urban areas. Small urban plots, small cultivated plots. That on one side. Of course, that depends on the area. In most flat areas and irrigated areas we have larger holdings, but as you go up to the mountains or in the islands, the smaller the land holds. And on the other, we have large landowners, which are only the state, the Greek state, and the church. So the big landowner, if you like, it's not any private old feudal lord that control land through possession through the centuries, but it is, let's say, the state and the church. And this has to do with the history of Greek state formation and its past as an Ottoman occupied country, and as you know, under Ottoman law, private possession of land is prohibited, at least theoretically. I mean, this is written in the Quran. I mean, I don't know how that has been developed. So, the present regulatory framework of the conditions of exceptions that exist in Greece since 2009, with the memoranda and the conditions of Troika, changed dramatically the way we do politics, and by changing dramatically the way we do politics, it has also systematically downgrading the parliament and disregard the constitution. And this new framework is necessary, as I said before, because the target of big land ownership is public ownership. It's state ownership or church ownership or ownership related with state-related institutions like the public, the former public electricity network, power network, the trains, the railway system, the public water systems in major cities, etc. So those public agencies own large parts of land. And Greece is entering now, let's say, the group of countries as being targeted for land dispossession, not because of huge land estates, as for instance it happens in former Eastern Europe, where the, let's say, the communal and the state holdings had large amount of land ready for privatization, or as it happens in Africa and Latin America. I believe the Greek case is different in terms of some qualitative characteristics which make particular pieces of land extremely important as targets, and because it happens, I mean the whole crisis situation, at the same time as the global tendencies towards land speculation and land dispossession is also developing. So it's not the conjuncture independent of this combination between qualitative characteristics and what is happening today. And I have mentioned 6, and I'm going to go quickly through them. A very simple physical geographical factor, geostrategic location. I mean, it's not always the same. I mean, we know geostrategic locations doesn't remain in touch. They change through time. But nowadays, pipelines and logistics made the Greek space again, the physical space, a very strategic position. And that provides, let's say, kind of quasi-monopoly rent for those activities that are located here. The second one is the large property. I said before, it is state, church, or public agencies. And here we imitate Trojans, and we have formed Taipei, which is the Greek abbreviation of a similar kind of Trojan, which has collected all public property in one portfolio to make this land available to future investors. And this is one page from Taipei site, and those are some of the commodities ready for sale. The third, let's say, particular qualitative characteristics are the minerals and the anticipated oil and natural gas reserves, which have turned extractivism and land-related activities to a major target for land dispossession. Probably the best known case, because it's a very active social movement in Halkidiki, is the gold mining, which has just started. It's going to be a huge open pit. I mean, it's only the starting point of those 31,000 hectares. And the areas of exploration of drilling and gas, which has also changed dramatically the discussion and the willingness of different private companies to intervene. The third point is the privatization of public utilities and infrastructures. And here is a classical case of the Helleniko Airport, the area that we're going to visit tomorrow, which is, I mean, a primer target to be dispossessed in the name of paying back the debt. And fifth is, again, a physical and natural characteristics which became very important in our times. And it is the extensive coastline, the climate. So all kinds of those areas now, and I'm seeking one which is owned by a monastery, and it's going to be dispossessed by an English company to build a huge tourist resorts with golf courses. And here comes what Bernd has given us in the morning, Sell the Islands. And here is a very good answer to the argument by Rosa Luxemburg Institute, a very nice pamphlet, which has really challenged the whole argument by using that name, but also 20 popular fallacies about Greece. But we cannot blame Germans to have this type of view when our Prime Minister Samaras, and I'm quoting this here, has already said that, okay, we don't going to sell Corfu or Crete, but some other islands which probably are not so strategic, etc. I mean, why not? I mean, Samaras himself, he's saying that. And finally, no, it's not finally. And finally is the conjuncture that we live, and which, I mean, it has changed the economic or the oppressive mode of dispossession through something else. It is now dispossession by law, but this a dispossession by law which has not gone through the parliament or through the constitution, but it's a law which is highly unjustified and unconstitutional. So I will end with some notes on non-performing loans, particularly house mortgages and payments, which I believe it's another hidden aspect of the Greek crisis. Of course, the connection between unemployment and austerity, with increasing depression and rise of non-performing loans, it's not unique to Greece. But when you see the diagram here, you see how important for the Greek case are those non-performing loans vis-à-vis, let's say, Spain, that already has shown a major problem in crisis. And the diagram down here shows the blue line is unemployment, and the purple line is delays in paying mortgages. Already it has bypassed. This is 2000, the first quarter of 13. Now it's something like that over there. So why is this case in Greece? Because we have a law which protects the house or the apartment of a family if it is indebted. And this law gives us an exception until the end of 2013. So that's why now we have a struggle between the government and the Troika, and the government is trying to convince the Troika, please don't change the law, because if you change the law, I mean, it's going to be a social explosion, as you know. Because on top of what Dina was describing in terms of, let's say, on personal basis effects of the crisis, it's going to be on top the loss of housing. And this is not just a material important issue, but it's a very symbolic one at the same time. And to the end, if that is going to happen, two immediate effects will arise. The first is an immediate political and social reaction with unpredictable outcomes. And second, and this is, I believe, why Troika pushes the argument, is that a mass supply of houses because of evictions, because the houses will end up in the hands of the banks, it's going to decrease dramatically and accidentally the land market in Greece, which is already down by 15 to 30% depending on the area, and that means a massive drop down of any kind of land values. And this is exactly the issue that all those, let's say, predatory investors are waiting to happen. And this is the place and the case where we struggle. Thanks for your attention.